Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Masso, the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement for the Therri Foundation. I'm here with another one of our wonderful alumni to talk about her journey and what she's up to now. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Therri Usher. I am a 2007 UT Dallas Terry Scholar, and I am a mathematical statistician at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So as a statistician, I support the evaluation and the regulation of drugs, particularly drugs related to rare diseases. I promote the review of the safety and efficacy of such drugs throughout the drug development process.
So Therri, for our talk today, what is one thing you hope that fellow Therri scholars will take away?
So I hope that you'll take away that you deserve a place, and wherever you feel like you don't belong, you can make space. You deserve to be there. As a Terry Scholar, you are more than capable of being there. And also, don't be afraid to go after the career that you want. Don't be afraid to alter your career in a way that satisfies you.
I'm really looking forward to people hearing about your journey and how you've taken the opportunities presented to you to really carve out your place and create the career that you have now. So thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, I think one of the places that would be great for us to start is from the beginning in your intro to the Terry program and your intro to the Terry community and what that was like for you first coming on the scholarship.
Okay, so I'm originally from Corpus Christi, Texas, and I was in high school, and luckily I actually had a great guidance counselor, and so she told me about this foundation that gives out scholarships, and I had applied to UTSA as well as UT Dallas, and she was like, you could use a scholarship at either one. So I applied for the scholarship. At the time, my high school would only send out official transcripts themselves, like they wouldn't give one to me. So they had to send off my whole package. I got a phone call from Black Torres, who's the Terry Foundation coordinator at UT Dallas at the time. And she was like, yeah, we received half your application. It looks good. You have till Monday to submit the rest if you want to be considered. So it turns out my high school actually sent half of the application to UT Dallas and then the other half to University of Dallas. So I almost didn't become a Terry Scholar. My high school actually had to submit on letterhead that it was their mistake and that I had actually gave them everything on time. But luckily, you know, I was awarded a Terry Foundation scholarship. So I ended up going to UT Dallas, and I was part of the second cohort at UT Dallas. So it just started the year before. Everyone that I had met, every Terry Scholar was super cool, got along great, became some of my closest friends. And I remember being excited about going on the first picnic. At the time, there was only one picnic, so everyone traveled to the same location in Round Top, and was not excited about waking up at 4 a.m. to get on the bus to go there, but excited to experience sort of this rite of passage that every Terry Scholar knows about. And get there, Round Top is in the middle of nowhere, and we get to the picnic, and you know, it was great to see all these other Terry Scholars. Actually, one of my friends from middle school was also Terry Scholar at ETSA. It was great to catch up with her. But one thing that I noticed is that it wasn't a ton of diversity, particularly with regards to African Americans. So that was a bit jarring for me to realize that I was one of the few. It didn't take away from the camaraderie I felt within, you know, my fellow UTD Terry Scholars. But it was just, it was an eye-opening experience to me. I think that is something that the Terry Foundation has gotten better at. Even in the 4 years that I was a Terry Scholar at UTD, I noticed the shift when going to the annual picnics, which were always in Round Top, seeing a change in the demographics. So I appreciate the Terry Foundation for doing that, although it was never explicitly said, but I appreciate the change in the demographics. I did feel a tad out of place at my first picnic, but I will say that I never felt less welcomed from anyone. So yeah, my Terry experience was a great one. I still have close friends because of the Terry Foundation. Funny story, two of them came to my wedding. I told both of them, I was like, look, I wanted to get married at the courthouse, and my husband and my mother were not hearing it. And I literally told them, hey, I'm getting married. This wedding is to appease my mother. Don't waste your money. They were like, yeah, whatever. What hotel should we stay at? So yeah, great friendships, great experiences. Really blessed beyond what I thought was possible. I thought I was just getting a free ride to college, but I got so much more out of the deal.
So I want to go back to that first picnic and to the way that you felt kind of looking at this community that you were, finding your place in. Do you have advice? Because I'm sure this happens all the time for students, for one reason or another. But do you have advice for someone who's trying to figure out how to build and maintain connections in a group where it initially feels like you don't have a lot in common with people, whether that's with something like your scholarship foundation or even on campus or at work?
Yeah, I would say one, recognize that you belong. I find that a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome, even the people that you don't think would suffer from imposter syndrome. Just know that you belong there. You have a place there. And just because someone doesn't look like you doesn't mean that you don't have common ground with them. So I completed my doctorate at Johns Hopkins, and my cohort had 9 members. 4 of them were Chinese students from mainland China, and never would have thought that we had anything in common. But I'm a huge basketball fan. I love the NBA. They were huge basketball fans. Like, we're actually on basketball teams in Baltimore, recreational teams, and so that became our thing that we bonded over. And I still speak to them on occasion. I see them at conferences, and we pick up the same conversations. So there's always something that you can bond with someone over, even if they don't look like you or you don't think you get along with them.
So fast forwarding from your time in Terry then to your time in Baltimore at Hopkins, what were you doing at Johns Hopkins? Like, what was your focus area for grad school?
So I went to the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I was in the doctoral program for biostatistics. For those who don't know what biostatistics is, it's really statistics related to biology or biological processes, or in my case, public health. So I got to Baltimore, didn't quite know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to research. When I was at UT Dallas, I worked with a professor of statistics on proteomic research, which is related to like protein expressions. I then did a about face and started working on social determinants of health. I was funded on a training grant related to aging research. So my particular interest was how health disparities, particularly racial health disparities, impact the aging process. And so spent 5 years on that training grant, did applied research, which was what I like to do. I'm not much of a statistical methodology doing research just for the sake of doing research type of person. But my dissertation, is more methodical. So yeah, had my fair share of applied and theoretical research. But one thing that I always enjoyed doing was teaching. So I did a lot of teaching focused work. I took classes on teaching at the university level, took part in a teaching certification program within Johns Hopkins. So when I graduated, they also included this sort of certificate saying, hey, she's done the different modules to show that she's trained and capable of teaching at the college and university level. And I also applied for a teaching fellowship while I was there and was awarded the teaching fellowship. I designed a course on introducing data analysis to undergraduate students who are majoring in public health. So I taught that course for a year. So those are the main things that I did during that time.
How did you decide on Hopkins?
So I graduated from UTD in 2011, which was sort of the tail end of the recession. I had done a lot of preparation in math education. I was part of the inaugural class of UTeach Dallas. The UTeach program is a program designed to get students certified to teach math and science. Because of the recession, it was a little bit harder to find a job. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just apply to master's programs and, kind of do that for 2 years, kind of ride this recession out and then apply for jobs. I was actually studying for the teaching certifications within Texas as I was applying to graduate schools, and I applied to schools in Texas. My uncle, I've always been an uncle's girl. My mom was the youngest of 3 and the only girl. She had 2 very overprotective brothers, and so they were the same over me. And I was talking to one of them, and he was just like, well, you're so smart, you're so talented. How about Harvard or Stanford or something like that? And I was like, yeah, no way. And he just kept on me about it. And I was like, okay, Johns Hopkins has the #1 school of public health in the country. Will you be satisfied if I apply there? And he was like, yes. So I applied to their master's program. And I got a call from the graduate director of the biotest program at the time. And he was just like, if you want to get a master's degree, that's fine, but have you considered a PhD program? And I actually thought I was being pranked. And so I called a couple of my friends, one of whom was a Therri scholar. And I was just like, oh, this is real funny, guys. Like, how did you pull this off? And they were like, no, this is real. So I Googled him. He was actually the graduate director in the department. I had a conversation with him, and he extended an invitation to come to Baltimore to interview for the PhD program. So I went, I interviewed, I met several professors on the faculty, and I was ultimately admitted into the PhD program. The PhD program came with full funding. PhD programs in math and statistics typically do come with full funding for tuition as well as a living stipend, compared to master's programs, which, there could be assistance, but it's not guaranteed funding. So I accepted the offer, the amendments into the PhD program at Hopkins. And so there I went.
Well, I have to say, I'm really happy that you had a family member who pushed you to look at programs that you thought for yourself were just not for whatever reason, not in the cards, not in your realm of options. I feel like it's so easy to do that to ourselves too. We're always our worst critic, and sometimes it takes somebody outside, I think, with the outside perspective to remind us, like, do the limits really exist, or are you imagining them? Or are you putting them there and being able to see them for what they really are? So having somebody in your corner to challenge you is always good. And then also having people in your corner, like those friends, to call and say, like, okay, are you pranking me, or is this for is this for real? Just to be like a sounding board when something like that happens.
Yeah, no, I think both of the points that you make are great. My uncle was definitely the one to push me into applying. He pushed me in everything. He actually passed away my first year of graduate school, and I actually dedicated my dissertation to him. So yeah, and
Got it.
my friends were still there as I was going through the graduate program, and I was just like, this stuff is insane. One of them, her name is Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Started her doctoral program 2 years after me, and she was like, "You're right. This is insane." so, so
So you're
yeah.
kind of the trailblazer in that way. What was a challenge you faced during your time at Hopkins or during the time that you were doing your research?
There are several challenges that I faced. One was being away from Texas for the first time. There's a cultural difference between different areas of the United States. Um, I was that Southern hospitality girl, speak to everyone that I meet. Finally, one of my professors, who's from New York City, he was just like, "Stop doing that. Don't do that here. Stop speaking to everyone." Um, so I think he was more concerned about my safety than random people. But yeah, so that took some getting over. Yeah, not having the traditional foods that I like to eat. Um, yeah, I remember going to the grocery store and asking one of the workers where the tortilla section was, and they looked at me like I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The Mission tortillas, and would have cried if there was not a guy there from Austin.
Oh.
um, uh, so the cultural differences, like having to walk everywhere, that was new. Um, but for me, imposter syndrome was real. It was really real. I'm going to be honest, I was often used to being the smartest person in the room. That was not the case at Johns Hopkins. Um, I struggled a lot my first year, so not just being away from home, but so like in my program, we take our qualifying exams at the end of the first year, and it was common knowledge at the time throughout the School of Public Health that most biostat students don't pass qualifying exams first year. Um, but I failed all but one, which meant I couldn't repeat that year. I had to wait a whole other year to retake those exams. So that was rough. Um, being the only African American student in my department, which is strange even for Hopkins. There were no African American faculty in my department, no Hispanic faculty in my department. Um, so yeah, kind of feeling like it was all on me and kind of putting that added pressure on myself. Um, so let's see, my department is over 100 years old. I am the third African American to graduate with a PhD from the department. Um, I remember at one point trying to explain to my department chair how demoralizing it is to walk around in a city that the majority of people look like you, to be in a neighborhood where everyone looks like you, and then to walk into the buildings of Johns Hopkins and no one looks like me except the janitors. So I don't think she fully understood because she couldn't fully understand. But that was difficult for me, and also with studying health disparities, it's hard to see all the things that you're studying in real time in the neighborhood in which you work in. Um, so lots of different challenges. But luckily, I was able to find others who understood my issues. I had a very supportive thesis advisor who, you know, was not of color, but he gave me the space to vent and to share my frustrations. And he tried to empathize as best as he could, but just always supported me in everything. Still does. So, yeah.
So I guess going back to that idea of building a community for yourself and building a support system for yourself, you found that in your advisor. What were some other ways that you built built a community for yourself, or built yourself a support system during that time, which must have been very difficult, like you said?
So the main thing is that my first college roommate, I was actually a part of a program called the Clark program at UT Dallas, which allows you to work in a research lab before you start your freshman year. So I was a Clark scholar and she was a McDermott scholar, but she was the only female McDermott scholar who was doing research before starting college. And so we lived in the same apartment for the summer before college on campus. And then we didn't live together again, but we always remained friends. And she was actually admitted to Hopkins as well for their neuroscience program. And so we lived together while we were at Hopkins. And so I can't tell you how great it is to come home and have someone who understands. I don't think I would have made it through without her. We were experiencing a lot of the same issues. She was kind of that person in the beginning who was like, okay, you need to take a break. Come on, let's go for a walk. Let's go get something to eat. The thing about biostats programs is that they're intense in the beginning because you have a ton of coursework. Meanwhile, she was in a laboratory science, so started off relatively okay and then ramped up, around the time that she was finishing because she spent so much time in the lab. So the first year or two, she was the one who would be like, hey, we need to take a break. Meanwhile, fifth year, I'm the one going to the lab. It was like, hey, it's time for you to come home. So yeah, she was a great source of support for me. I ended up meeting who would be my husband. Was it after my first year, actually not too long after failing my qualifying exam. And so I call him my calm in the storm. He's definitely my calm in the storm, and he was there right along with me. I made a ton of friends while I was at Hopkins who understood what the doctoral life was like. Other professors in different departments that I conducted research with, they were great. They shared their insights, even just talking to them, for instance, about being a woman in academia, things like that. So I tell students all the time who come to me and say that they're interested in graduate school, I tell them, find your tribe. Like, you need your squad, you need that support system.
In so many different ways too, whether it's helping make that transition into a new environment or continuing to help reinforce for you that your place in that environment has been hard earned and is valid. And then also, I think helping you figure out where you're providing that for other people too, and figuring out how you can then turn around and perpetuate that. You were looking at programs in academia, and then as we know, that's not where you work. So where did that shift come from? How did that transition happen where you're now at the FDA?
Yeah, so I had a mentor in graduate school. I had originally met her when I was attending a conference, and I was on a student panel. And so I talked to her before, and then I applied to an official mentoring program and was actually matched to her as a mentor because I indicated I wanted to learn more about working in the government. One thing about being in academia, you're surrounded by professors. You get a pretty good sense of what it's like to work in academia. I just wanted to learn more about working in the government. The nice thing is that Baltimore and the FDA are not that far from each other. So we would meet about once a month, and she would, very much act as a mentor to me. So when I was on the job market, she knew all about where I was applying to and things like that. I used a career service at a particular conference to get connected with different employers. I was not selected by FDA, and I told her that, and she was like, "Oh, you really want to interview with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm open. It's still the early stages, At the very least, it's good practice for interviewing." And started interviewing with the different statisticians there. And one thing I noticed was like everyone looked happy. Not like they didn't look non-stressed. They just looked happy. Like they looked like they wanted to be there. They wanted to do that work. For those who have been in graduate school, the week that your professors have a grant due, they look like death warmed over. Like they have not slept in days. They just look genuinely happy to be there, happy to be working on the mission of FDA, happy to be protecting and promoting the public health of the American people. So that was probably the main thing that struck me. And then they started talking about the work that they did and how they have an immediate public health impact. And looking back on it, I will never forget working on my first drug review, seeing the drug be approved and then seeing the commercial for it come on TV. I mean, you don't get much more public health impact than that. So the immediate public health impact, the work-life balance. FDA has a lot of great internal programs for work balance. Before my husband and I bought a house, I took a ton of financial courses. I've even taken classes on happiness and optimism. So that was very much appealing to me. And then also, every single statistician I talked to, I felt like had their own individual career, and it looked different than someone else's career. So they were able to pick and choose outside of their regulatory responsibilities. They were able to pick and choose the things that mattered to them, the things that they wanted to contribute to. And so after my full day interview, I was kind of sold. So yeah, I was offered a position at FDA. It was funny because my thesis advisor went on sabbatical right before I started interviewing. He was gone for 2 months, ran off to Italy. Mm-hmm. He comes back and I'm like, yeah, I accepted an offer from the FDA, like academia. And he was quiet for a while. And I actually thought he was upset with me for a little while. Uh-huh. So one of the postdocs in my department, she was like, yeah, he was talking about it at the faculty lunch. I was like, oh, he must be really mad at me. He was like, no, not at you. He's like, he feels like if you felt swayed enough to leave academia, then academia is in trouble. If he was basically like, you know, this is a major loss for a university. So yeah, I ended up in government instead of academia. I don't regret it for 1 second. I've been able to build my career the way I want to. I do work that has that immediate public health impact. I do a good amount of service. So for instance, I'm the vice chair of the American Statistical Association's Committee on Minorities and Statistics. I'm the chair of a conference called StatFest. I'm active within the Eastern North American region of the International Biometric Society. I used to sit on the regional advisory board. I give a lot of ambassador talks at different universities, so I still get to interact with students. I've even given a talk at a career day for elementary school. I think that's been by far my favorite, just to see kids kind of realize, hey, you know, there is something useful to this whole math thing that they didn't realize. So there are not a lot of statisticians of color. So once you kind of meet them, you kind of become part of this larger family. Mm. So I knew quite a few of them. They knew that I was at FDA. I guess I should also mention that my mentor, who works at the FDA, was heavily involved in some of the same diversity-related initiatives that I am. And when I accepted the role, I really didn't think they'd put me in her division. But my mentor is actually now my supervisor. So that's been an interesting transition in our relationship. But the nice thing is that she's more than supportive of my activities with regards to service. People helped her get to where she is. She helped me get to where I am. And it's my responsibility to help the next generation of statisticians. I work on a lot of diversity-related initiatives, but I help I try to help anyone who's interested in whatever. There have been people that have expressed interest to me in different areas, and I try to connect them as best as I can. One thing is I do have friends who are in different areas of STEM. I remember the same career day at the elementary school. I was explaining the type of work that I do. I work on a very multidisciplinary team. And so I was giving an example of pharmacology and how they use, animals for their work. And this one kid lit up and asked me all these questions about it. And so I emailed one of my colleagues. I was like, there's this little boy who seems to be really interested in pharmacology. Would you mind getting in touch with him? And he was like, sure, no problem. So certain activities I have received clearance from my office to do. And so that is factored into my actual, I won't say job description, but my actual responsibilities.
Okay.
So it's actually discussed during my performance evaluation, particularly the larger things like serving as a vice chair of an ASA committee. That takes a bit of time. So that was approved by my office. Anytime that I generally use the title of FDA, I try to get office approval. I do speak to students informally, like if a student sends me an email or something like that. But my office has been really supportive of the work that I do. And it's nice for them because when I'm working on these initiatives and they see that I'm affiliated with FDA, that lets them know that essentially the FDA is supporting me being here.
Yeah. That's really great that it's entwined into your actual evaluation in your effectiveness in your role. And it's not all just sort of this like, as you have time for it, extra stuff on the side.
That definitely helps.
So I guess whenever somebody's looking into not even just making a career move, but just in general trying to assess the right environment for themselves, what advice would you give them in terms of trying to decide if a position is for them?
So I took a leadership course within FDA, and one of the modules was on career advancement, and I actually had to interview someone in a leadership position who's not in my direct line of direct chain of command. And so I interviewed someone and I asked her a similar question, like, how do you decide where to work or like how to move or how to advance your career? And she told me, go where you are needed. That's a huge thing. We tend to get complacent. We tend to think of comfort, but really, are you needed here? Like, do they need you? Are you making a difference? So that's a huge component, but also go where you're respected. If you don't have a positive work life, there's no amount of money that they can pay you to make it worth it for you to stay. I've seen negative work experiences impact people's mental and physical health. So I would say go where you're needed and go where you are appreciated.
That's such great advice. I think one of the things that I really admire and appreciate about your story and just your description of where you're at is you've been able to carve for yourself this path that is unique for your goals, whether that was, education or service, as well as putting your education and your skills to the best use where you could feel effective. But just the fact that it's also intertwined with the job that you do, it's part of your position. And I think that's really, really cool because a lot of people don't consider that that's a possibility and wouldn't even think to ask or to suggest it. But as you outlined, it also benefits the employer if you as a representative are able to go out and show that you're making a positive impact and you're helping get, honestly, more people into the pipeline to do the same kind of work in the future. Yeah, that's something that I really admire, the way that you were able to find all of these elements that are very important to you and incorporate them into the work that you do, while also making sure that you're in an environment that's best for you time-wise, balance, just overall, I think happiness and being able to decide for yourself, this is what will make me happy. And then here's how I'm going to bring in all of the different pieces to do that. I think for people that are just getting started, that's probably a very foreign concept or one that doesn't feel attainable.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, if you can tell an employer how something you're passionate about can help improve the institution or can help them achieve some objectives that they've been trying to achieve, I find that they're way more supportive of what you want to do when you highlight how it benefits them. So not, hey, this is something I'm really passionate about. This will make me happy. They consider that, but it's definitely more of an impact when you can tie it to their mission, for instance, or their vision or their values.
Do you have any advice for that student who might be trying to work on being more mindful or make some of these decisions?
Identify what really matters to you. What's important to you? Um, be let like your values, let you know the things that are important to you guide you rather than some plan for your life or some timeline, because plans fall apart, timelines rarely work out. Let your values drive you, and don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. You never know what you might find from stepping out. You can make great connections, great relationships, great opportunities, um, and trust in yourself, trust in your abilities, trust in you know what you have to offer. You are meant to be where you are. Like, you earned your right to be there. You're a Terry Scholar, so you are certainly more than capable of doing whatever you want to do. So have faith in yourself.
Thank you so much for, I think, your story of both encouraging people to take space where they certainly deserve it, but then also to turn around and make space. That's, again, that's one of the things I really admire about this role that you've built for yourself and that you continue to build for yourself, is that you prioritize, this is how I want to make space for others. And then you've demonstrated that multiple times in different ways, your ability to go back and do that. So it's really impressive, and it's really inspirational. And so I thank you for sharing that message with your fellow Terrys, especially during what might be a pretty uncertain, I think, uncertain time or uncertain environment just in general. But that's something good to remember overall, even if we're not in pandemic times. So
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This has been great.